this video is about castling. If you already know how to castle, then you don't need to watch this video. Castling is a special move where you swap your king and your rook to get your king to safety. Let's see how it happens. The first thing to do is you need to clear the space between your king and your rook. So your king is here and your rook is here. So the bishop and the knight need to move before you can castle. So let's look at just a normal opening here. So the knight comes out, and we're one move closer to castling. And the bishop comes out, close to castling again. We didn't castle yet, but we could have. Right now we could castle. And how you castle is you move your king 2 squares. It normally can only move 1, but you can castle, you move 2 squares, and your rook goes on the square next to where your king moves. So you swap your king and your rook. You can see how that goes. Okay, let's keep going. Black can make a move. White can make a move. And same thing, black. Let's see how black castles. Black can castle like this. So king moves 2 squares, rook on the other side. Now there are some rules for castling. The first rule is your king cannot have moved first. If your king has moved in the game, then you can never castle that game. Same thing. If the rook where you're castling to has moved, you can never castle. So if we did something really silly like this, and then we went back, then white can never castle. Right? We cannot castle here, even though it looks like we can, because we have moved our king. Okay? Same thing goes for the rook. If we move our rook, again we do something like this, move our rook back. Black can castle because he hasn't moved his king or his rook, but white can never castle on this side of the board. But we've only moved the rook in this example, not the king. So let's look if we keep going. Let's say that white clears out some pieces on the queen side, like this. Now, even though this rook is moved on the king's side, white can still castle on the queen's side. Of course, if the king has moved, you can never castle. Let's look at another example for castling. Okay, black's going to play queen here, check. Now, we would love to castle, get our king to safety, but we can't castle out of check. You cannot castle when you're in check. So white will have to do something else. Maybe white can block. And then white would be able to castle the next move, as long as he wasn't in check again. Here's another example. It looks like white can castle, but he can't. And the reason he can't is because this square is controlled by the black queen. And you can't cross through a square that is controlled by your opponent. So you can't castle here. So you can't castle when you're in check. You can't castle through check. That's what this is, castling through check. And of course you can't castle into check. You can't castle where you would be in check, because then your king would be taken, of course, which you can't do in chess. Okay, so let's look at another. Okay, so white can't castle, but let's say white moves instead. Now black, can black castle? Well, as long as the rook and the king have not moved, black can actually castle to the other side of the board, queen side. So black can take his king and rook and switch like this. And you can see the king moves 2 squares, and the rook moves the square next to the king. Let's look at one more example. Can black ever castle this game? Well, no, he can't, because he's moved his king. Even if he goes back to the square that he was on before, he can't castle even queenside. So remember, if you've ever moved your king, you can't castle.